Hey everybody, and thanks for tuning in. This is going to be the first in a series of videos to look at how can we deploy Azure infrastructure using HashiCorp Terraform code. So without further ado, this is the first video of the series. Getting started, let's just jump straight on in. Okay, so there are going to be a few prereqs that we need to get set up, and I'm not going to go through those in any fine detail. I'll give you some pointers as to how to get started with those. But a few of the prereqs are about getting things installed on your local machine. I'm using a Windows PC to run all of my code and development work that I do at the moment. So first thing you're going to need to do is pick an editor, a code editor of choice. I use VS Code, Visual Studio Codes, mainly because it's free. It's a great format. It's very extensible. You can hook in a lot of different plugins and elements and extensions into that product. So if you want to install VS Code, you can go over to the VS Code, the Visual Studio Code website, and download that for your platform of choice. Once we've got that installed, the next thing that we're going to need is the Azure Cli Module. So again, this can be installed directly by a direct download with a little executable. So search that up on the Microsoft Docs website, installation of the Azure Cli. Third thing, it's not paramount, but I think you'll find it useful if you get involved with Git now, is to download and install a local version of Git. So it's a code repository version and control system. And we're going to hook this up now in this initial video with GitHub, which is a public-facing website, which is a Git, a repository, a version control platform. So if you've not got Git installed, I highly recommend that you do, because although you don't necessarily need it as such for the initial pieces of work we're going to look at in the basics, it will certainly come in handy later down the line. And then, of course, one of the fourth main components is the actual Terraform platform, the modules itself. So, again, you can jump over to the HashiCorp website, and on the Learn pages, there is a whole section of how to install Terraform. But just one quick kind of heads up, I use a package manager called Chocolatey. So you can install a GUI front end to it. If you're a little bit uncomfortable with the command line experience, that will come as you do more and more of this stuff. But for now, you can use something like Chocolatey, and you can search through all the various extensions and install them. So pick those first four that I suggested, and you shouldn't go far wrong. But you can use any sort of elements of that you can remove and use your own, absolutely. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do now is we're going to jump over to my GitHub repository. The first thing I like to do when I'm starting on any new little project is create a GitHub repository, mainly as a central area that I can store my code and store it in a public cloud way, so you guys can view and use that in any which way that you feel fit. And of course, if there happens to be a problem with my PC or something goes wrong with the disk, at least I know I've got a copy of that code in that repository. So I'm going to head over to my repositories area in GitHub. I'm going to click on Create New. I'm going to give this a name. I'll call it Terraform Basics. I'm not going to worry about a description. I'm going to leave this set to public so anybody can get access to this. And I'm just going to initialize the repository. I'm just going to put an empty README file in there. And I'm going to click Create Repository. So that's it. I've got my repository created in the cloud now in my GitHub account. I can take a copy of that URL. And you can see I've just got this this readme.md is basically just one header saying Terraform Basics. That's it. Everything else is empty. So on that note, let's flick over to my VS Code installation. I'm going to open up a new console window. This is what VS Code looks like when you first start it up. Now, I've got a few extensions installed down the side here. I'm not going to dwell on these too much, but I've got things like GitHub extension. You can click here and you can find as many extensions as you like. Not going to dwell on that too much just now. What I am going to do is I'm going to say, right, okay, the first thing we want to do is we want to make a copy, a clone of that repository we just created. So if I hold down Shift, Control, and press P, I can click on this item here or search for it, Git clone. I can paste the URL in of my Terraform Basics GitHub repository, hit enter, then I'm asked for a location that I want to save this to. So this is, I've got a folder on my D drive called Projects. That's the top level folder. I'm going to use that to save my GitHub repository. And then down here, just behind my camera, you can see, right, that's cloned. Do you want to open it? So I'm going to click on Open. And there we go. I get a copy of that README file that we saw that had Terraform basics. So readme.md is a markdown language. It's a very simplified version similar to HTML, but with very simple commands there to get text in there. But anyway, we've now got a copy of that GitHub repository on my local machine, and it's controlled within my Git on my local machine now, and I can push and pull files from that GitHub repository as and when I choose. Okay, we'll close that README file down for now. First thing we want to do is let's just jump straight on into creating our first Terraform file. Okay, so in a nutshell, the format that Terraform uses to run its scripts is a file extension, a file name called .tf. So the first thing I'm going to do is create my main.tf. That is a single Terraform file that I'm going to use, that when I run my Terraform commands, it will process that file and essentially do what I'm telling it to do within that file. Now, the main.tf file is split up, and like I say, this is a very much a getting started video, and as we get more involved, we can see how we can split these files up and create other types of files that we can use for other things that we'll get into in a little bit more detail in later videos. But the first thing that we need to do is we need to declare within our file what provider we're going to use. So if you recall off this website, if I can quickly find it, we've got our Terraform provider's GitHub URL here. This is our GitHub repo. And you can see that for the Azure RM, the Azure Resource Manager, that is the name of a Terraform provider that we're going to use to manipulate bits and pieces within Azure. Terraform provides lots and lots and lots of different providers for various cloud platforms and other platforms such as G-Cloud, AWS, Docker, or there are lots. You can click on this Terraform providers link and you can see all the different resource providers. But the main one we're interested in is the Azure Resource Manager, the Azure RM. And we can see here that it's currently at release version 2.52. So we just need to tell our script that that's what we actually want to use. So the first code block we have is the Terraform required providers. We're saying it's going to be the Azure RM provider, and we're just saying, right, okay, that's the source, HashiCorp/Azure RM, and that's the version that we're going to use. It's as simple as that. So it's a very simplified code block in this JSON format. It's actually HashiCorp configuration language. HCL is the format that this is being written in. Okay, now we've got that. We just need to configure the provider. So there's another code block for that. And that is basically the provider is Azure RM. We won't worry about this features area just yet, just to know that you need to put that in there. So we've got the provider source, and we've got the provider being configured within our file. So we've basically said, this is what we want to use. This is it. This is what we're using. Now we can jump straight into creating our resources within code. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to create a very simple piece of infrastructure that we're going to deploy to Azure. And it's going to be a resource group. It's going to be a virtual network. And then we're going to put one subnet in that virtual network. So let's jump on in. So in order to create our first resource, we need to use this resource type. So resource type is Azure RM resource group, and we're going to call it within the Terraform code myrg. So these parameters that we pass through to that block now, it would be the name that we're going to call the resource group in Azure and the location of UK South. So hopefully, if you are relatively familiar with creating resources through the Azure portal, those things will kind of seem a little bit familiar with a bit of luck. Okay, so that's our resource group created, well, in code. The next thing that we're going to do is create a VNet. So similar principle, getting a little bit more complicated now. We're using the resource and the resource type of Azure RM virtual network. We're going to call this a myVNet. Again, that's for referencing within the code itself. But then in Azure, we're going to call it Johnny Chips VNet. Now, you can see that we're now, rather than having to type the name of our resource group as Johnny Chips RG and putting that in here, we can now start to reference the previous code blocks. So remember, we called the resource group myrg, and all we're saying is that we want to find a resource group called myrg, and we want to use the name of that, which is Johnny Chips-RG. So when we declare and define Terraform script and code, there's a principle really called don't repeat yourself, dry. They call it, so that you're basically writing things once and then reusing many times. It's a very common principle in programming in general. So this is the first kind of idea behind what we're looking at here. Very similarly, for the location, we're going to pick up the resource group dot location, which I didn't want to move that around, but our location is UK South. So effectively what we're saying is we're creating a resource group. We're going to use those same parameters and we're going to feed them into my VNet. So if I change that there, it'll change on the VNet, vice versa. Finally, the last piece of resource that we're going to create is the subnet. So we're going to create a subnet within this VNet. Again, same principles. Now this time we're going to use the resource group name like we did in the previous, but now we're going to feed in the VNet name so we know which VNet is actually going to be assigned to. And that's it. We've now, if I save that now, we've now declared our first piece of Terraform code in, sort of a few minutes. So you can see, just to recap, we've got the required provider, we're configuring the provider, then we're creating 3 resources. Now, like I say, we will get a little bit more complicated as the videos go on. This is a getting started video, so hopefully that gives you enough information now to understand the format. And we've just used a single main.tf file. We will get into the more complex numbers of files and other elements of Terraform like modules in later videos. But for now, this is probably as basic as you want to get with Terraform, just to kind of start feeling your feet. So I save that off now. Now I save that on my local machine. Remember that we created that GitHub repository. It would be nice if we could commit that code into our Git repository and then sync it, push it back up to our origin, which is in GitHub. So you can see that in VS Code, it gives us a little bit of a visual prompt. Equally, if I open a terminal window here, and you can see that I'm browse. I use this this PowerShell posh command setup. So I'm in my Terraform Basics folder. I could use git commands in here. I could commit it. So I'm going to say initial code. Initial code, that'll do. I'm going to commit that. And I spelled initial wrong, but it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to sync that. I'm going to push it down here up to my GitHub repository. So that'll take a moment. And just to show that we've now got that. So this is my GitHub repo. If I refresh this page, you can see that I've got this main.tf with my misspelt initial code. So main.tf, there's our code that we just created. And it's now in a repository. We'll get to some of the benefits of doing that in later videos, but for now, you can see that we've created our code, we've installed all our relative modules, we've created our code, and we've now pushed that up to our GitHub repository. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do now is actually run this code using Terraform. So the first thing that we need to do is that we need to initialize this folder. So we need to download a copy of that executable, that 2.52 Azure RM executable file that can then parse my script and do stuff within Azure for us. So there's a Terraform command for that, and that is called Terraform init, I-N-I-T. So if I run that, what you should see now, take a few moments, is that it's finding our Azure RM provider, and it's trying to find the version 2.52. It's saying it's installing that version, and it's installed, and Terraform has created a log file to record the provider selections it made below. So you can see that we've got now a couple of files and folders appear here in our folder structure. One is called Terraform, and we appear to have this 2.52 Azure RM exe file in there. That's what it just did with that init command. So it's initialized that folder. We'll get to other things that we can do in future videos, but this is really the first start, the basics of it. Okay, so what can we do next? And generally speaking, the next thing that we can run is Terraform plan. So it's going to take the code that I've written. It's going to take a look at where I'm logged on to, which is a good point. I'm going to delete that Terraform plan because I haven't yet logged on to, if I just clear this screen down, to my Azure subscription. So I'm going to use Azure CLI now, and I'm just going to issue a command of Azure Login, AZ Login. What that's going to do, it's going to open a little browser window. It's going to ask me for modern authentication onto my Azure subscription, and you can see there I'm logged in, so I can close that browser down, and it's found a whole bunch of subscriptions there. I'm just going to clear that down for a second. I've got a lot of subscriptions that I've got access to, so I just need to make sure that I'm going to actually connect to the correct subscription. So to do that, I can use the Azure CLI command az account set -s for subscription, and the subscription I want to use is npn-jonlin. So I hit that, and that's it now. I've set that subscription. That is the subscription that I'm targeting within my my login, my account login, my tenant logon. Okay, so we've done the Terraform in it. Let's do that Terraform plan now. So what it's going to do now, I've logged on and authenticated to the Azure platform. And again, there are other ways that we can authenticate to that platform. It doesn't have to be an interactive login like this. We could set secrets. We could use certificates. We could even use principal names, so service SPN, service principal names. Give our machine an account that can be used within Azure. Again, this is the very basics. We're using AZCLI just to interactively log on to our session, but there are other ways, and they can be looked into in future videos or of your own accord. Okay, so we're logged on. We're going to run a Terraform plan, and this will take a few moments, but what this is going to do is it's going to go off, take a look within my subscription that we're logged into at the moment, and it's going to see, can I find, have I got a state file? Do I know what I'm looking for? And it'll report back. It'll say, well, look, this appears that I don't know anything about this. It appears that I now need to create some resources for you, which would be correct. So these green pluses, amount to I'm going to create. So we're going to create a resource group. We're going to create a subnet, and we're going to create a VNet. And you can see that we know some of the parameters, such as location is going to be UK South. We know that the resource group name is going to be Johnny Chips RG, but you can see that there are also parameters that will be known after the application, which keep that in the back of your mind, because that's always a great thing to understand, that things like public IPs and when we configure certain components in Azure, there's certain elements that we simply don't know until we actually create that. Now we can programmatically extract that information and maybe use it in other modules. But like I say, this is the basics for now, so just keep that in the back of your mind. We will certainly explore some of those things in later videos. So you can see I've run the plan, and the plan is telling me it will add 3 resources. There's nothing to change, and there's nothing to destroy. So okay, that's fine. The next command is Terraform Apply. So now I'm saying happy with that. The plan looks good. There's no errors. There's no issues being reported back, and you can see there that it's saying that because I haven't specified an out parameter, we'll worry about that in another video. But effectively, if we run Terraform Apply now, the theory is that should get created. So let's just go ahead and do it. And of course, it helps if you spell it correctly. So Terraform Apply. We'll give that a few moments. Like I say, what this is doing now is this is going off and it's having a look at our subscription that we're logged on to. It's rerunning a plan, and you can see that it's come back with the same information saying, right, I'm going to create 3 resources, 0 to change, 0 to destroy. Are you happy? Yes. You can set a flag if you want to auto approve. You don't want to have to type yes. So let's just click yes there and we wait. And this is our first piece of Terraform code that is now creating some infrastructure within your Azure environment. So it takes a few moments to complete. There we go. So that apply, what took all of about 15 seconds or so. We can see that it's reported back that we got 3 added, 0 changed, 0 destroyed. So what happens now if I were to run Terraform Apply or even Terraform Plan? Again, what do we think would happen? Let's have a look. So in theory, we know that Terraform has now just deployed this infrastructure into Azure. And we'll take a look in our Azure portal in a minute. So we haven't changed anything. So if we run the plan, Terraform comes back and it tells us no changes. Infrastructure is up to date. Okay, so let's just jump on over into our Azure portal and just double check that. So here we are on my subscription. I'm going to click on resource groups, and we can see we've got my resource. Ignore the other resource groups, but this one is the one that we've just created, Johnny Chips-RG. And lo and behold, in there we have a single VNet called Johnny Chips VNet. We've got the address space that we declared in our code, and we've also got, if I click on subnets, the subnet that I declared. So there we go. So we have now just defined that in code. So what happens if we made a mistake? Say we didn't want that to be 10.0.1. We wanted that to be 10.0.2. What would that look like in Terraform? Well, let's give it a go. So if we go back to our main .tf, and we say, right, okay, actually this subnet, I didn't want it to be 10.0.1, I wanted it to be 10.0.2. We can do that, and we can save the file. Remember that we've saved that file now. And what I'm going to do before I do anything else is I'm going to commit that. I'm going to say subnet changed. I'm going to commit that, and that'll take a moment or two. Then I'm going to push that to my Github repository. So I've basically made a change, and I've stored that back to my Github repository now. Okay, so I've now made that change to change that subnet. So let's just see what happens if I type in Terraform plan again. See what information it gives me back. It's got a little message there. Don't worry about that GitHub message that came back there for a second. Okay, interesting. So we've got this concept now that there's nothing to add, but it is going to change something, and it's not going to destroy anything. You can see that the subnet, my subnet, the address prefixes, it's going to remove this 10.0.1, and it's going to add 10.0.2. Okay, so if I run the Terraform Apply, hit that, and we give that a moment or two, that's actually now going to apply those changes that I just made in code, if I type in yes, to our tenant. So we'll give that a few moments to complete, which again, it shouldn't take too long because they're not huge changes that we're making. It's just obviously going to run those commands against the Azure portal and then report back. And there we go. We get the apply complete, 1 changed, 0 destroyed. So if we hook on over to our tenant, and if I refresh this on the screen, there we go. You can see that that has just changed in real time effectively. So there we go. There's the basics with how we create our first Terraform file, how we initialize the folder, how we plan and apply that. Let's just say now we wanted to actually remove everything, just tidy up. We're just doing this for a bit of fun and testing things. There's one final command. If I clear the screen there now, there is one final command we can use, and that is Terraform Destroy. What this is going to do is, as the name suggests, it's going to go ahead and destroy everything that it knows about. So you can see 0 to add, 0 to change, 3 to destroy. This is effectively me going, okay, I've done everything I need to do now. I'm going to remove it all from my tenant, because personally I'm just doing this as a little test and a little development thing. But absolutely destroy could very well be a relative thing for your business or something that you need to work on. But this is going to take a little bit longer now, a few moments just to go into Azure, delete all of those resources, speak to the Azure Resource Manager, issue the destroy instruction, but effectively we'll come back hopefully with a complete message, and that will be our kind of initial look at the basics of using Terraform. So there we go. Took a few moments. Destroy complete, 3 resources destroyed. If I flick back over to the portal, let's give that a refresh. Yep, not found, can't find it anymore. So we've got our resource group there. If I refresh that, we're on 8 at the moment, and we're down to 7. So we've removed our resource group. So there we have it. Thanks for watching this video. Like I say, we'll be getting into future videos now, going into a little bit more detail, looking at how we can use Terraform and some of the Terraform modules and outputs and lots of different things. So for now, thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you found this video useful. And until next time, thank you very much.